We may be, as well as, in addition to talking with Dominick Crea, we may actually be chatting with Sam Nunberg as well. And Matt, do we have Sam Nunberg on the line, or is that Dominick Crea from Great, wonderful. I love it's a perfect compliment to my last two conversations. Dominick Crea has this terrific podcast called Justice Tech Pros. And first, Dominick, I have to begin by thanking you for the nice shout out you gave me in the last episode. Not only mentioning me, but basically doing a whole commercial for this radio show. How do I not have you back after that?
Well, it's the least I could do. I appreciate you even having me back on. It's an honor. Thank you.
It's a terrific podcast. If people haven't listened to it yet, they can just search it on YouTube, Justice Tech Pros. It really takes you inside the criminal justice system at a level that you don't see usually on television or read in the newspapers. And if you think what you heard from Bernie Kerik and Kristen Davis was something, you have to see some of the insight that you're going to learn in this Justice Tech Pros podcast. In one of the other recent podcasts you did, you focused a little bit on a gentleman named David Evangelista. Who is David Evangelista for people that don't know?
He's an informant. He was actually an informant on the last case that I was assigned to, which was also my father's case. And he's just a jailhouse informant. He was a bank robber. And basically, I don't even like to call him an informant, and I said this on my podcast, regardless of one's opinion on an informant, they should, at the very least, tell the truth. So when they don't, I really don't even classify them as informants. I would just call them a liar because they're making up stories. And it was pretty much proven this guy, is a habitual liar and would do whatever he can to make deals. He was trying to make deals for years. And to prove my point, after his testimony, he was facing 40 years because of bank robbery and escape, a bunch of other charges. And he wound up getting time served. So he's, out and about after facing 40 years for his testimony. And it just, again, it proves my point. If you're a liar and you select a target that the government's really looking to get, you could get yourself a get-out-of-jail-free card.
Well, no, you're exactly right. I mean, I spent a lot of time talking about this on Sunday evening with respect to Sammy Gravano's get-out-of-jail-free card for committing at least 19 murders because he was willing to testify against a high-profile defendant. Now, Dominick, explain to folks that maybe missed our previous conversation or are unfamiliar with your podcast, what is it that you do when you say the last trial that you worked on? In what capacity did you work on it?
My firm is a litigation support firm. We focus a lot on the e-discovery. So just to simplify it, we do a lot of things, but one of the main focus that we have is when a client comes to us, which is either a firm or an attorney, nowadays the discovery that they issue, which is basically the evidence. When they say discovery, it's the evidence against the defendant or defendants. It's on hard drives a lot of the times, and it gets a little complex. There's a lot of folders on the hard drives. It's hard to navigate them. It's hard to extract the data. It's hard to decipher the data. So we assist with that. We'll pull it out. We'll try to find any investigative work that could help the client, that could help the case. We try to sort everything and just make it more manageable so that the attorneys could better prep themselves for trial and have things before we get to the trial phase. They'll have it laid out in front of them, and it allows you to also dig a little deeper. And if we find helpful information, we're able to kind of go down that route and elaborate on it and really digest it.
Well, and no, it's a fascinating podcast. So the episode "Twisting and Turning," by the way, incredibly, you have 16,000 views on this most recent episode of the podcast. What I wouldn't give to get 16,000 downloads on anything I'm doing, I'll tell you. You spent some time talking about lie detector tests. Now, it's very interesting because my wife and I just started watching the series Homeland, and they have this episode in season 1 that has to do with lie detector tests, and we end up talking about it, and she basically was saying, well, they're not admissible in court for a reason. I don't put a lot of stock into what these polygraph tests were saying, and I've heard from other people, including defense attorneys, that they're actually more reliable than you think. Give me your take on how effective lie detector or polygraph examinations usually are.
Well, I think they're extremely effective, and I think a lot of the times that just kind of pushes that point home for me personally is, if they're doing, and I spoke about this a little bit, if they're doing an investigation, a lot of times the investigators will give a lie detector test to a suspect. And if they pass it or they fail it, that'll dictate how their investigation proceeds. So obviously they have a lot of trust in them and how they play out. And it all depends on who's doing the test, who's administering it. But I'm talking about a professional, as long as the test is done appropriately by somebody who knows what they're doing. I think they're a strong indicator of deceit or whether somebody is trying to be truthful. And I think they should hold some weight, especially when people pass them with flying colors. From what I understand about it, there's a scale, and you could be close to the scale of deceit, or you could be far off from it. And when you get some people who are extremely on the opposite end of that scale, where there's no doubt they're telling the truth, especially the average individual. I know they try to say people could beat lie detector tests, but the average person, when they're going to take a lie detector test, they don't have years of practicing on beating a test. So normally you're going to get pretty positive results one way or the other.
So you're of the belief that polygraph exams, even though they may not be 100%, they should be admissible in court.
I do believe that. I believe they should be admissible, especially if you have somebody being charged with some serious crimes and they're passing these tests time and again with flying colors. I've encountered it where you have somebody, just to revert back to what we said earlier, if you're dealing with an informant who says they know somebody and they told somebody something, and then you give that individual a polygraph test and they pass it where they said they never met this person, never told them anything, and now you just, dismiss it as if it doesn't mean anything. So you're going to take the word of somebody. It's really one word against the other, and you're going to go with the informant. I mean, you see it time and again, and that's just one example of it. But I'm just saying you see that time and again where it'll be used if it's, or it will be cited if it's part of what an agenda is. But if it works against a narrative, they don't want to use it and they don't want to talk about it.
Yeah. No, it's a terrific point. And we're talking with Dominick Crea. You can hear him regularly. He does the Justice Tech Pros podcast. You could search it on YouTube. I've become a big fan. One of the things that I was just talking with Bernie Kerrick about, and Kristen Davis, because they were in the unique position of being very high-profile people when they were indicted. And what happens when you're high-profile, whether you're a gangster, whether you're a political candidate, whether you're a police commissioner, is, you do become a target because prosecutors, by indicting a high-profile person and successfully convicting them, that's their ticket to promotion. That's their ticket to publicity. And if you're a guy like Eliot Spitzer, Andrew Cuomo, Rudy Giuliani, William Weld, Chris Christie, it can also be your ticket to political office. Do you think it's more difficult or less difficult for a high-profile person to get a fair trial?
It's absolutely more difficult because right from the beginning, usually the narrative is to have them painted as guilty. You never have somebody who's making the headlines and they're saying, well, they're innocent, but they got indicted anyway. It's always where they have to fight an uphill battle. If they want the public to assume, well, if they got indicted, the evidence was there to indict them, and therefore the odds are that they're guilty. And that's not even the facts. I mean, there's an old saying, a grand jury can indict a ham sandwich.
Right.
So there's not this huge threshold that the public thinks somebody has to meet to get indicted. That's not the case at all. So to get indicted, it's very easy to get indicted. And the problem is the way they play it out and the way they talk about it. The average citizen would think, well, if this person's indicted, that's strike one against them. So immediately it's an uphill battle. And as you hit on, when you get a high-profile target, you get the headlines, you get the publicity. There's a ton of, things going on in the justice system. People get indicted that you never hear of. You only hear the high-profile ones.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. And a lot of these cases end up in plea agreements anyway. That phrase that a grand jury can indict a ham sandwich, that comes to us from former New York Chief Judge Saul Wackler, who I've interviewed and I know a little bit. And he says he doesn't know why he chose ham sandwich. And I said because he's Jewish and ham is not kosher, it probably would have been more apropos choosing something like a pastrami sandwich. Dominick, what's the best way for folks to listen to your podcast, for folks to get in touch with you, for folks to learn more about what you're doing and what drives you?
They could actually, as you mentioned, they could just search Justice Tech Pros podcast on the internet. They could go to justicetechpros.com, and it will come up. They'll see the different sites that the podcast is available on. It's on YouTube, Spotify, all the different outlets. Started off on YouTube, so that's really the main platform, but that's the best way, and they'll see email, contact information, anything they need right from there.
Outstanding. All right. Well, thank you, Dominick. I hope we can chat again soon.
Yeah, absolutely, and thank you again, Frank.
Thank you. Check them out, Justice Tech Pros.